today and then Sunday, probably in the morning. It's weddings, you know, that goes.
Not that old, don't have a flicker. Okay. Got it. I can do the flicker, okay. I'll be yours. That's good. Yeah.
No,
Hey, Todd. Introduce you to Mayor Harkey.
hi,
It's Todd Code.
welcome to Team Chandler. Nice to meet you.
Thrilled to have
That's what I hear.
you.
That's pretty cool.
Where do I sit so I can get called? Oh, like you have a chance over the back. Wherever you want to sit is fine. Twice in like, this is so awesome.
You.
All right. I think we'll have a few stragglers come in, but we'll go ahead and get started. And I want to welcome you to our actually first large group Boarding Commission member open meeting law training. Kelly Schwab, the city attorney, and I'm Dana DeLong, the city clerk. And we are going to go through and just tell you about open meeting law, conflict of interest, some public records laws, and then kind of how you run your meetings and questions and answer any questions you might have about running meetings and those types of things. First, the mayor stopped by. He's honored us and he just wanted to say a few words.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, I really did ask if I could just give a greeting. I want to thank each of you for expressing interest in serving our community. And we're excited to see how you can contribute. Your role is really important. We get a lot of grassroots gathering of information, as well as kind of the initial recommendations for decisions that will be making their way through the city and eventually to my desk and councils that you guys will be forwarding and deciding through your lenses and your eyes about how we can continue to make Chandler better. So I'm grateful to each and every one of you. The first thing I ever did in the city was serve on a commission. I've been living here for a few years back in the 80s, and I really felt that I wanted to get more involved in Chandler. So I started doing things like showing up on trash cleanup days, on Cesar Chavez days, and cleaning up alleys and doing this. But then I met a council member who asked if I would serve on a charter revision committee. That was we haven't done one since then, so I guess I'm gonna get it right. Probably needs to be looked at again, actually. But I got to meet some people who were on the same board that we became friends, and we still connect today. It was over 30 years ago. And so it was kind of cool to be in that position with others. And after that, I served on a few other boards, and I really appreciated the city looking at people like us, like I was, like you are, to really help us. We really want to be a well-run city, the best-run city. And we know that it's not just through my eyes or council, but it is our community. And I want to thank you. You've expressed interest specifically on areas that you think you could help or desire to have an interest in. And that really means a lot to us. And we will continue to be looking at you. If there's areas that, I'll say on the other hand from my side that I look at all the information that comes up, whether it's parks, boards and commissions, and currently we've got recommendations for spending from HHSC. Is anybody on that one coming up? Yeah, really, really important. And at times the community doesn't always agree with that, but I will always endeavor to have your back, whatever that means in these cases. And I just look forward to your serving, or as many of you there will be continuing to serve. And thank you for your interest in continuing to help us make the community that's transparent a community that gets a lot of grassroots input, and a community that best serves all of us. So heartfelt from Park Team, thank you so much. And thank you for giving me a minute or so to take your time. So
Glad you're here, Mayor.
I gotta go home and pack. I've got a wedding in Minnesota that I'm leaving for early tomorrow, so we'll see you in future events.
Okay, so again, yes, welcome. I'm so happy that you're all here. We're gonna kind of tag team this. Kelly Schwab is our city attorney and she's been doing this for a very long time. So we talk about how we can kind of do the presentation off the top of our head. She's very good. So she's gonna start out and go over the open meeting law and conflict of interest and things like that, and then we'll go to public records.
Awesome.
So it's just this.
Okay, this one.
All right, so, and I didn't put my song. I need to start this with the Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun, because we're Arizona, we're a sunshine state. And so what does that mean? It means in Arizona, the public's business must be done in public, where the public can come watch it and participate. So we have what's called the open meeting law in Arizona that governs all of our public body meetings. And we'll talk about what that specifically means in just a minute. But it means that we have to post notice of our public meetings. We have to post an agenda to give people an idea of what we're going to talk about. You have to have a quorum present. So if you have a 7-member board, generally your quorum is 4 people. And you have to post the notice at least 24 hours in advance. We exclude Sundays from that by law and holidays. And except in a case of an actual emergency. And I'll tell you, I have been doing this a very long time, 30 years now. Hate to admit that. And I've had one actual emergency in all of that time. And it was literally floodwaters coming down the river. And the council wanted to give the authority to the Public Works Department to take all the equipment and shore up the day so that the city did not get flooded. That's my one and only actual emergency I've had. Even COVID, I did not have an actual emergency justifying an emergency meeting. So what is a public body? Well, obviously the city council, obviously the board or commission that you're on. All corporations or other municipality or other instrumentalities whose board of directors does city business. So for example, we have a municipal property corporation that helps us deal with city-owned property. We have an industrial development authority that provides bond financing for private corporations. They also have to comply with the open meeting law. So quasi-judicial bodies, the Board of Adjustment, standing special or advisory committees or subcommittees, where the intent of those committees is to make recommendations to the city council. So we actually have council subcommittees. There are 3 council members, and they meet as a subcommittee. And they really hate me when I say you can't have a 4th one attend, because now you have a quorum of the council. It becomes a council meeting. So we have subcommittees that are reviewing things and making recommendations to the full council. I know the HHFC has subcommittees that meet as well. I don't know. What kind of boards do we have? What representation? I know we have the Arts Commission. What other boards? Library. IDA. Neighborhood Advisory. Yep. Airport Commission.
Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals. Municipal council. So we start. Thank you. So quite this variety here. So that's great. So if you have a subcommittee that is making recommendations to the full board, they have to comply with the open meeting law as well. Public bodies do not include. We have a weekly directors meeting that we get together, every director throughout the city, and we meet together. We are not a public body. We do not have to comply with the open meeting law. If the city manager appoints a committee to advise staff on certain things, say he wants to look at employee benefits, he can form that committee. But because they make recommendations to the city manager, not the city council, they are not a public body. And then obviously a department head is not a public body. That being said, I will say the work we do is open to the public. We have public records we're going to talk about. So a lot of what we do is open to the public, even though we can't do this without complying with the open meeting law. So what is a meeting? And that seems pretty basic, like, okay, we'll get together, we have a meeting, pretty simple. So a meeting occurs anytime a quorum of the public body gets together to discuss, propose, or take legal action. And that can occur in person, that can occur electronically, on the telephone, on video calls, and email. We're going to talk a little bit more about that because email is the new pitfall for open meeting law violations. If you read recently about our neighboring town, they recently had an open meeting law violation involving emails. So even when you finish the meeting and you're out in the parking lot and there may be 4 of you standing there or a quarter of your body, and you start talking about, that was a great meeting, but here's what we need to do now. Guess what? Yeah, you're no longer in compliance with the open meeting law. You can talk about the Cardinals, but I would recommend that you, well, first of all, I'm not sure you want to talk about the Cardinals. We'll see, maybe, hopefully it's better here. But if you're out in the parking lot and there's a quorum of you talking, public that sees you, they're going to assume that you're talking about business, even if you're not. So just be careful. You'll find the mayor and council, they're pretty trained. They'll count heads when they go to different places. Make sure there's not a quorum of them gathered together. So what do we have to do to have a legal meeting? Well, we have to post an agenda that tells the public where we're going to be, what time, and a description of things we're going to talk about. And my advice on that, and most city attorneys' advice, is make sure the agenda has enough description that as a member of the public, I can pick up the agenda and go, I'm interested in this. I care about this. I want to go hear the discussion. So I don't recommend that you have vague, we're going to discuss our 2023 action plan. What does that say? It doesn't say that. But you say we're going to discuss our 2023 action plan to include fundraising for the museum, to include acquisition of new artwork. Give them enough context that somebody can say, wow, this matters to me. I want to go hear about it. Or I don't care. I don't want to go hear about it.
What about fact-finding businesses that want to tour a local business or see you have like a legislative breakfast up there?
Mhm. So if you're going to have a quorum of the public body there, it has to be open to the public. Actually, on occasion, it's not my favorite way to operate, but on occasion, we've taken a busload of board members somewhere to go visit. If you're going to have the whole board there, and we have to make room for new public ones for a while. And I do
The question.
I'm sorry, the question was, what if we want to do a fact-finding visit, go offsite or, go to a particular site and look at it? My best recommendation on that is do it with less than a quorum. But if we do it with the full body, then the public has the right to jump on that bus and go along with you. So we have ways of working it, or, we get you there and you have a meeting there. There's different ways we can work it, but best thing is talk to your staff liaison if you want to do something like that, and we'll work with them to figure out a legal way for you to do it that complies with our laws.
Art pieces of art around the city,
Mhm.
and different boards and commissions will go visit them. We have 4 among a group of 15. Are you in violation?
So
Do you have to post it?
if it's just a group that's going and you're just going to visit it and you're not going to talk about, what I'd recommend if you're going to do that is you don't talk about our business. You go visit it and don't talk about it until you get back to an actual meeting with an agenda. Those are always a little sensitive, but if it's truly just going and looking at it, saying, wow, look, we did a great thing here. Fine, but if you start talking about it, and that's hard, because you all are on boards and commissions because things matter. The airport's important to you, right? See, that's why you join. So I don't know about you, but I get with a group of lawyers, I want to talk about law, I want to talk about politics, because that's my life. And so it's kind of hard when you're with a group of like-minded people not to talk about the business. So again, there's different ways we can find compliance. Sometimes we'll post a notice that says a quorum of the board will be traveling to art pieces, but no business, city business will be discussed. And then, it's up to your staff person or your fellow board members to hold you accountable to that. So must include, but then we can include unscheduled public appearances. So if you have someone, I'll pick on Ashley for a minute. Somebody wants to go to the neighborhood advisory commission, which never happens. Times they show up and they want to address the commission. If we put on the agenda, we allow unscheduled public appearances, they can do that. And we'll talk about the legal parameters of that. So you can put that on. I definitely do not recommend for subcommittees where you're a working group trying to get to a recommendation for your big committee, but boards and commissions have that on their agenda, and the council does as well. And then you can allow for a report on current events from your chairpersons, or your chair members, your board members, and the staff person. They can give a report. That can't turn into discussion. So unscheduled public appearances. First of all, it has to be something within the jurisdiction of the board. So if I go to the Neighborhood Advisory Commission and I want to talk about utility rates, what should the chair's statement to me be? Not on the agenda. Well, no, they can actually talk to you about things not on the agenda. You can't respond, but they can talk to you. But it has to be within their jurisdiction. Council sets utility rates. Neighborhood Advisory Committee does not. So it has to be something within your board's jurisdiction. So if somebody wants to go to the Art Commission and talk about zoning on a piece of property, it's not within their jurisdiction. So there can be no discussion. Members of the public body, so your board can say, this is a good point. She raises a good point. Let's talk about it at the next meeting. Or the mayor do this a lot. Somebody will come and say, I've got a pothole on the street in front of my house and people are damaging their tires. Can you do something about it? The mayor will turn to the city manager and say, city manager, would you look into that and take care of it? Perfectly legal. And you can respond to criticism. The problem with responding to criticism, it always turns into a discussion. It never stops with just one response. So I always caution people about that. Because you know what you can do to solve that? If somebody comes and says, I think your board is not operating legally, it's out of line, you board members are doing a horrible job. Next agenda, have a report and say, here's what we've done. We've consulted with the city attorney, we're perfectly legal. And by the way, we have, helped the city purchase artwork. We have helped bring new exhibits to the museum. You can always have it on the next agenda and talk about it. So that one time, it's easy to get caught up in the moment, but you can fix it very easily by putting it on agenda at the next meeting. So when can we meet in private? Most of your boards will probably never meet in private because we have very specific things under the state law that we can meet in private on, and we put them on the agenda. So Jane and I will be meeting in private with the council on Monday, because they do our annual review. So they're going to be meeting with us about our employment. So they can do that. They don't have to do that in public. I meet with the council in private a lot of times for legal advice. Tell them, here's what we can do. Here's risks, liability risks. Here's why we don't recommend this. I can give them legal advice. When we're in the middle of trying to negotiate contracts, we can meet with the council to talk to them about the negotiations with direction from them. Should we go out for a proposal and enter into contracts for the development of certain property? There's different things we can do, but if there's a contract negotiation, we can talk to them in private. Because it's great, because if the council decides they want to go buy 5 acres for something, guess what happens to every vacant 5-acre parcel in the city? Price goes up. So we do have that ability because we're announcing that in public. Obviously, that final contract's going to come before the council for action in public because the public's business is done in public. Litigation, I can talk litigation strategy with the council in private. We can discuss security and critical infrastructure. This is a brand new provision in the law. It came in 2020. So if we're having, we want to protect our water treatment plans and we have things for security purposes, critical infrastructure, we can talk to the council in private because we want to maintain our security. We want to protect our city assets from any bad actors. And again, we can negotiate for purchase, sell, or lease of real property. We can discuss records exempt
by law from public inspection, and we can talk about negotiations with our employee organizations. We have 3 employee organizations in the city, 2 police and 1 fire. And so when it's time for, to talk about the contract that we have with them, we can talk to the council. Other than that, we have to meet in public. So those are executive sessions. We still have to put it on the agenda. We still have to give a general description of what we're talking about, more than meeting for legal advice. We have to say meeting for legal advice regarding, and give an idea of what we're talking about. They can't take legal action. There's no votes except to adjourn an executive session, but they can instruct their attorneys and representatives on particular things, contracts, litigation, settlement discussions, real property, and negotiations with our employee organizations. So this is a quiz. Can we discuss matters on the agenda? Who's voting for all of the above? Yay! Good, I've done my job. So I'm going to turn this part over to Dana, who works diligently with her time. So minutes are a very important part of it's the official record of, what's decided, all the work that you've done. So it's very important, and they are required of all boards and commissions and subcommittees and everything. But basically what happens is once you hold a meeting, right after the meeting, within 3 working days, you have to have a draft or results of what you discussed at that meeting. And we call them draft results until your full minutes have been approved. So on those draft minutes, you'll need the date and time and place that the meeting was held, the members that were absent or present, the names of the persons making statements or presenting to the public body, and then you'll need a description of the matters discussed, so what's on your agenda, and then if any legal actions were opposed. So if you took a vote, so if you had a consent agenda, you took a vote on that, that needs to show what that vote was. And then those results, those draft minutes, then go on the webpage so that someone can say, well, I didn't make it to this meeting, so what did they decide? They can see that. And then once you approve the formal minutes, then those need to be posted 2 days after that final approval. So minutes are very important, and we work really hard to get our liaisons to get those done, get them back so you can sign them, and then get them on the website. Okay.
What is the webpage that we find?
On the city's website, there's a board and commissions page, and it lists all the different boards and commissions there are. If you go to that page, it'll list those results. It'll send a link to there. So we have it for the council as well. Yeah. So open meeting pitfalls. These are where I want to talk to you about how to avoid complaints and violations. So serial meetings are always a problem. And we always caution it can be done verbally, by telephone, or email. And it's, you get 3 board members, not a quorum, together, and you talk about, we're going to talk about zoning a new piece of property coming in. We want to zone that property. And we're very excited about it. It's going to be a great project. So they start talking about, I think it needs to be zoned commercial. We need more commercial development in that area. And they're so excited about it. They pick up the phone, they call their fellow board members and say, hey, on that property at Chandler Boulevard and Arizona Avenue, we're going to be zoning it. I think it should be commercial. And then pretty soon you've got the quorum and you're talking about which to happen with that piece of property. Well, guess what? Public can't hear that. They can't be involved in that. So that can constitute a violation of the open meeting law. Emails. So you'll get emails from your liaison that says, we're going to have board and commission open meeting law training, and here's where it's going to be. And they send it to all of you. Is that a violation? No. Because you're not discussing, proposing, or taking legal action. The problem comes in when somebody hits reply all and says, and also I want our board to include business. Then now that's a violation. I'm going to use the real life example, and I will tell you, I take this very personally because I did open meeting law training for the town of Gilbert, board and commission members and mayor and council for many years. And recently, it was in the paper that the mayor was a little disturbed by the new logo, and she hit reply all to the mayor and council saying, we're not gonna use this logo, I want to get rid of it. And she hit reply all. So now she is discussing the public's business in private via email, the public can participate. So I always say, and this is why I'm really disturbed personally, every one of these trainings I do, if you take nothing else away from this training, please never reply all to emails for reporting commission. Never, never, never. In fact, when I send emails to the council, which I do on occasion, I always put a reminder, and please do not reply all or forward these emails. That way we avoid the discussion. So, and it's really important because the media is always requesting emails because they know a lot of business now gets done via email. We used to do formal letters and things like that. A lot of us use email daily. The media knows that's where a lot of discussions go on. So they request them a lot and they're public records. They can get access to them. And so that's where we're seeing open meeting law complaints coming is through emails, not in Chandler. And I want to keep it that way. Yes, Ashley.
If people that you know are UCC sender, right? And that's if they respond, they're only replying to the sender. Right, but does that mean that you can't see who is being emailed, that it's not transparent?
It can be okay, but again, what are you saying? And if you're proposing something to the rest of the board that really should be discussed in open meeting law, that can be problematic. But it would definitely keep the discussion from occurring because you don't know who's on the emails. Reply all something that you in trouble. So it protects against that. But again, I would caution if you're sending out, hey board, I want us to consider the better practices. Hey staff member, would you please put on the agenda for consideration? Then it's in public and not.
Social media, and I think. So we talked about that. We talked about emails, social media and social events.
So having said all that, what if the mayor's daughter is getting married and he invites the rest of the council? Can they go to the wedding? Yes, they absolutely can. I could have a party at my house, or I could invite the mayor and council. There's nothing wrong with that. What the mayor and council cannot do is talk city business. So, and with social media, the mayor has an open Facebook page. Anyone can see it. He doesn't really use it a lot to promote necessarily ideas, he promotes city events and things. But if you have a closed Facebook page, like mine, only certain people can see my Facebook page. If you have a closed Facebook page and you have a quorum of the board or commission members that are friends with you, and you start posting about things that is business and they start replying, that could be a violation. So if for your social media pages, I recommend either being open or just not talk about your board or commission business on it.
So yes, and we do for the mayor and council, if they're going to be at an event like the League, Arizona League of Cities and Towns conference that happens every year, they all go. They should all go. Important business. We let the public know they're going to be there, but we also let the public know they're not going to be talking about public business there. They're going to be learning. They're going to be networking. They're going to be doing all that. But a forum's not going to get together and talk about Chandler business. So the key.
So what happens if we violate the open meeting law? And this is what this whole training is about. Well, any legal actions taken are null and void. The attorney general can investigate. A public official may be removed from office for violations. So $500 a day civil penalty if you're found to be in violation of the open meeting law. Costs for enforcement can be imposed, and you can't use city money to defend. That being said, if we have a complaint, there's no validity to it, we'll defend it. But if
mayor and council, and I always refer to them because that's who I work closest with. If the mayor and council were found to violate the open meeting law, they've had that discussion going on via email. They can be penalized, and we can't pay that. We, the city, can't pay that. They have to pay that themselves. So that's why the training is super important. I love this, you know, you're excited, you're enthusiastic, it's great, and then I could tell you all the negative parts about being in this position. But I will,
How do we determine how long the violation lasts?
it's usually one day, because it's, but if it's like on a social media site that's being, people will continue to comment on, it could be more than one day. But
It's taken
I was thinking not for open meeting law. We're going to talk about conflict of interest. So that is not happening. Yeah. No, I had, clients where they've had complaints filed. I think any of them in 30 years have had, that they found that they were actually in violation. We've had some unique situations where we've talked to the Attorney General's office, you know, kind of in this and getting direction, and I assure them we'll retraining and all that, but usually if it's a minor infraction, the AG's office will say, we want these people to go to training, and they may monitor these for a while. That's usually more common, but it can be more severe, and especially if it's an egregious, you know, an intentional, that's what they'll look at, were they intentionally trying to do business out of the public lives? Any questions on open meeting law? And I do appreciate the questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, I received some information. And working on it. I can forward other board members.
Absolutely.
Conveying.
And if you do send an email out like that to all your board and commission members, I strongly recommend just put on in all capital letters, do not hit reply all, because that avoids the discussion that puts people, it makes that awareness that I'm not going to respond and ask that. But if it's information like webinar.
Also, I was just gonna say, you can utilize your staff liaison for that type of thing too, because if it goes to the staff liaison, the liaison says that.
I would probably have to stand up first.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, Susan.
So that, I have to follow on. Because you've been all and commission members here, that's a really great morning to go. As they're all attending that people forum, notice the attending webinars, attention to their chat on the site, where they're interacting. Like, how does that play out?
Again, I would recommend, because they're all going to be, you know, watching it, that just not comment on business that comes before your board. You can ask questions on it, get clarification, like, you know, how would you go about obtaining funding for that, for transportation? But not say on the chat, if you know that there's a quorum of your members that this is a great idea, so let's work on, you know, but getting clarification, things like that. Absolutely. Webinars are a little tricky. The whole, I'm a dinosaur. I remember when we didn't have all this electronic stuff. When I started practicing law, we had the second law. Now we do. It's made, you know, we get quick responses and everybody's so eager to respond, but it's created some unique pitfalls for us now.
Would you say, so if it wasn't a webinar, but it was more like, if it was an article, like an opinion piece about something that the committee or commission had been discussing, then it's almost like it's by boarding it, it is a discussion. Would it be better, would it be safest to give it to staff to distribute?
It's safest to give it to staff to distribute. But again, you're just forwarding it for information to help with the board. It's not so much a problem, but if it's more you're forwarding it because you really want them to kind of buy into it so we can do it here, that may be a different story. So it's kind of a judgment call. So I always recommend sending it to staff anyway. Plus, we're going to talk a little later about public records and also that too. Okay, so conflict of interest. So you're now a public official as a member of a public body. So you are now bound by the conflict of interest laws as well. So what does that mean? So how do I know if I have a conflict of interest? Well, you look at, will my vote cause me to gain or lose something? And I like to use zoning because that's an easy one. So if you're on the planning commission and you have a zoning case coming forward and you live next to that piece of property, do you think it might matter to you what's developed on that property? Could it affect your property values? Absolutely. So you probably have a pecuniary interest in that vote. So then we'll talk a minute about what's remote and what's substantial. And if it's substantial, then you have conflict and you don't participate in the discussion or the vote. There are remote interests, and I do like to talk about them, especially if you have insomnia, read about them. We have the book. Exciting stuff. But let me give you an example. To be a council member in Chandler, you have to live in Chandler. Not you, but I pay the city of Chandler for my water, sewer, and garbage. So the mayor and council presumably all have city water, sewer, and garbage. So can they vote to increase our water rates? Do they have a pecuniary interest in the water rates? Absolutely. Because if they vote to increase it, they're going to pay more. Trust me when I tell you, they do not get a break on their water rates, nor do we in staff. We pay the same rate everybody else does. So yes, they have a pecuniary interest. So the law realizes that. And so if you're a member of a class of persons consisting of at least 10 members, and your standing is the same as everybody else's, you don't have a greater standing, you can vote. So they can vote on increasing our water rates or sewer rates or lowering. So even though they have pecuniary interest, it's a remote interest. And this is important too, because if that property I talked about a minute ago, say it is Google is expanding and they're building there, and I have Google stock. Now I have two interests, right? So if Google's expanding, their stock may go up. I have a pecuniary interest in that. So you don't have to go out, don't panic. You don't have to go look at your mutual funds and see where all your money's invested, because I have that too. As long as you own less than 3% of the shares of a corporation, even if a vote would benefit that corporation and possibly increase your value of your stock, you don't have to worry. If you have more than 3%, you probably have bigger issues to worry about too, more money. But you don't have to go out and look and say, oh my gosh, do I have to look at every stock that's in my mutual fund? But if you do have a substantial amount of stock in something and it's coming before your board for something, you do have to look at, will my stock value go up or down? But again, only if it's 3% or more. I can assure you I own nowhere near 3% of anything in stock. So we can also vote on reimbursing a public officer if they travel, like when the mayor goes back to the National League of Cities and Town Conference in Washington, D.C., he can vote to payments. The council has voted in the budget to reimburse them for travel expenses. So that's okay as well. So those are the specific ones, but I always recommend that if you guys, I may have a conflict here. I don't know for sure. Call your staff. We'll get on the phone with you. We'll walk you through it. I do that all the time. And I'd rather do it up front with you than afterwards go, yeah. And I'm going to tell you a real life story that happened to me. I had a mayor and council, not Chandler. They had a zoning case come forward in a smaller town. So sometimes zoning cases are really exciting. This was a really exciting one in downtown. And like many of the zoning cases, it's named after the property. They have weird names. So it's something like Main Street and First USA. Pretty innocuous name. Well, they were all excited because it was going to benefit downtown. So of course it comes forward. They do the presentation. The mayor and council all vote yes. Great, awesome. The thing about conflicts of interest, it extends to your family members. So if your wife has a conflict of interest, you have, or your child. So the mayor was at Sunday dinner with his grown kids, and his son goes, Dad, I am so excited. I forgot to tell you that new zoning case you just approved in Wickenburg? I had bought into that a month ago, so I'm part of the development team. So guess what? The mayor voted, had a conflict of interest, clear conflict of interest. There's no undo bell. You know, we don't have undo like we do on the computer in the law. So I'm like, great, what do we do? I have mayor that clearly voted with conflict of interest. Didn't do it intentionally, but he did it. So we brought the matter back at the next agenda for reconsideration. And the mayor declared conflict of interest. They voted on it again. And we called the attorney general's office, said, here's what we're doing. Is this good enough? And they said, yes, it was an inadvertent. But it is important. We have the same ethical obligations as attorneys. I can't represent someone that my husband has an interest in. We have the same requirements, similar requirements. So when my husband was working, he was working for a consultant. He was being farmed out to different corporations. And I'd be like, so who are you working for this week? Just so I knew, so that if I had an issue come before me legally, I was aware of what he was working on and could declare a conflict of interest. So make sure you know what your spouse is doing, your significant other, your children. It's important. So if they're doing stuff in Chandler that could affect your board.
How far does that extend?
It extends to parents, children, spouses. Not best friends. So again, what do I do if I have a conflict? You declare. We have a form you can fill out. Walk away. It's not right.
It should. It definitely
So
should.
talking about campaign donors, because my mind went to donors to the museum,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
But so,
Well, that would be possible. That should probably be a conflict too.
you know, I love that whole idea, the meme of saying Congress people should have to wear logos of all their big donors, you know? Wouldn't that be awesome? No, political contributions do not create a legal conflict.
They have the right to.
So, yes, developers, developer attorneys all donate to campaigns. And, you know, remember the laws are passed by politicians who need those donations to run for office. So that's why it doesn't. So if you have a conflict of interest, fill out the disclosure form. Do not take part in the discussion or action relating to that item. And then you know, avoid any appearance of a conflict. For the mayor and council, a lot of times I recommend they just leave the dais during that discussion completely. Then nobody can accuse them of kicking their partner, you know, the neighbor, the council member under the table to vote a certain way or anything like that. Just remove yourself. So just, you know, try to, hands off, I'm not going to participate. And then again, what happens if I violate? And if y'all remember, we had a county that got removed for a conflict of interest in the state. There was, yeah, for tax, he was buying tax parcels or something as a side business, but he was, in a way that it was a conflict of interest for him as the county treasurer. So, a civil suit can be filed if you have a conflict of interest. The court can award attorney's fees if you go to court. It is class 6 felony if you intentionally or knowingly vote having a conflict of interest. It's a class 1 misdemeanor. It's actually a crime if you're reckless or negligent. My example I used of the mayor that voted on his son's development. Was he negligent? Possibly, or his son was. Anyway, somebody should have communicated. You may have to forfeit the office. And if the mayor and council were to vote on a contract where there was conflict of interest, that contract by law could be canceled. So there's some pretty serious consequences with conflicts of interest. So a lot of you probably don't have to worry about it. But again, if you just have that, listen to your gut that says, I'm not quite sure, we will walk you through it. Shawn is one of the attorneys in my office. She covers a lot of meetings. She'll be at a number of meetings. I have other attorneys that cover meetings. Hit us up. We'll talk you through it. Happy to do that.
So if I'm on the airport commission, I also keep my airplane at. it's not a conflict of interest because there are more than 10 people that have.
Yeah. Exactly.
To the airport.
Blue. Exactly.
Goodness of my heart.
That's why we have that for, you know, the downtown partnerships, downtown businesses, that's another one, you know, this, we have a special taxing district down here and everything. So, it's a way we can have those special interests. I mean, it's important that people who do stuff at the airport are, their interests are represented on the commission. That's why we have those remote interests, is to allow people who have those interests to participate. And with that, I will turn it over to Dana.
Okay, public records. You can't talk about government without talking about public records. And how we manage those public records. And we're gonna just kind of give you a real high overview of how public records interact, you interact with public records in your role as a commission member. But to start with, you always have to figure out, you know, what is the definition of a record? And the state has done a really good job of telling us what a record is. And you'll notice that the state says a record is evidence of the organization and all of its decisions, procedures, functions, and operations that are made or received by any government agency throughout the course of business. So if you're doing city business, you're basically creating a public record. Public records can be informational or historical data, and they can be on any medium or format. So it's not just a piece of paper. It can be an audio or a video clip or something like that, something that documents the business of the city. What is not a record is library or museum material solely for reference or exhibition. So all the books in the library really are not public record. They are owned by the library. Extra copies for convenience or reference. So one of the best examples of this is when you get your agendas and your packets, there is an official copy of that agenda or your agenda packets, and that's kept by your staff liaison and managed through there. You get copies, so you don't have to keep those for a certain amount of time and then destroy them. We don't like to destroy them before the meeting, but you can throw those away or do what you recycle them. If you have hard copies of them, you can delete those that have those copies because it's not the official copy of the record. And the stocks of publication for sale or distribution are not records. So those are like flyers that get handed out, things. So if you just think about it, okay, is it evidence of what the organization is doing? And is it just a copy? Then if it's evidence in a copy, then no, you don't have to keep it. But if it's the official record, which your staff liaison is going to do, then that's what's managed.
That's why we like staff liaisons to send out emails, because they'll keep the record.
Yeah. So who has
Dana,
oh, sorry.
So if someone emails you and they're not on board, say they're a resident, and they ask you.
It can be, yes.
So then should you see your staff liaison like this?
Yes, you should go through your staff liaison. So what it turns into, and that's usually called correspondence. So if citizen sends something, a letter or an email to the city and asks about something, we can answer them, and that response is a public record also. And it has to be kept for a certain amount of time and then it can be destroyed. So, but if it goes to the staff, it gets sent to you and then you send it to the staff, and we're going to go into this, but that's the nice thing is it's on the city server. So you don't have to worry about it on your servers or on your email account because you send it to staff and now there's no. I know what you're talking about. So who has to comply with public records laws? Well, basically all of us in this room. The city council, board and commissions, including your subcommittees. Anything you do in a subcommittee has to be part of public record. And then employees of the public officers and public bodies. So all of us, we have to comply with the public records laws. So basically anyone interacting with in a capacity to serve the municipality. So as far as board and commission records, your member records are records, your applications to serve, your oaths of office, your policy acknowledgements. Those will be kept as records for a certain amount of time. We believe oaths are a certain amount of time or after you come off the board or commission, and then you can keep your oaths on file, then they get destroyed. And then, of course, your meeting records, agendas, supporting documentation for items, minutes, your meeting audio and video recordings, your speaker and comment cards, all those things related to the meeting. And actually, your agendas, your supporting documentation, and your minutes are all permanent. So they stay forever. If you want to know how long permanent is, it's 500 years, in case anyone ever asked you. Email is a public record, so it's not just a piece of paper. It's important to understand that electronic communications are public record and may be provided to response to public records requests or subpoenas. We'll get a lot of public records requests and say, can I have any and all emails that went back and forth with the mayor on a certain subject, and then we have to provide that information. So records are categorized by their content and not their format or medium in which they are created. So that's always important when understanding that. One thing to think about is emails that are sent out to commission members by staff or received by the staff, the city will maintain those. So you don't have to worry about that. But where you have to be careful is when you send information about the commission to anyone who's not city staff. And that's exactly why you want to do the staff, because you don't want there to be a public records request and someone come get your laptop or your phone to do research on your devices because you sent emails back and forth. You want to include that staff liaison. Questions about public records? We have a whole department for that. This is a little bit new what we've done before. We're going to go kind of into some meeting procedures, kind of a high level too. If you've been on meetings or in commissions for a long time, you probably followed a lot of this. But one thing that we do is we follow, boards and commissions follows the mayor and council rules and procedures. You'll hear a lot of people talk about Robert's rules of order. We don't follow those to the T.
No,
but
we don't want to.
We use them as a guideline, but the mayor and council have their own rules and procedures, and those apply to the boards and commissions as well. But for types of meetings, there's several reasons why you'll have a meeting and different types of meetings. You know, like your regular meetings are for formal action, which is taken by the public body. It includes scheduled or the unscheduled public appearances and staff presentations at a regular meeting. You can have a study session meeting, and that's where you hold a discussion on an item or certain subjects. You ask clarifying questions, gather more information from those involved on a particular item, but no decisions are made at study sessions. They have to go to a regular meeting where you vote on it. Kelly went over executive sessions and the reasons you can have an executive session. You can call a special meeting. So if you have your regular meetings on the second Tuesday of every month, but if something comes up and the board needs to meet, you can call a special meeting. If you have to pass something or discuss something that's timely, you can do special meetings. Work sessions. Work sessions are basically to learn more about a specific topic. The council uses work sessions a lot if they want to, study. They want a lot of information on maybe housing affordability. So they'll get a big presentation. That's the only thing on the agenda, and they'll talk about it. They won't vote on anything, but they can kind of give a consensus or direction to staff to maybe proceed in this manner, or to go back and find some more information, take it to a regular meeting where they can vote on it. So that's what work sessions are for. And of course, subcommittees a subcommittee is a portion of the full commission. It's designed to focus on a single matter and not take recommendations and then take recommendations to the full committee. And like Kelly was saying, the number of subcommittee members cannot be the number of members that constitutes a quorum of the full board. So a council, like if you have 4 members of the council, you have the full board. So your subcommittee has to be at least, under 4, 3, 3.5, something like that. But don't go with more than 4 or more. And then kind of going through and looking at what you have on your meetings. Start of the meeting, you'll do a call to the order, roll call. Some committees do pledge of allegiance. You have your scheduled appearances and your unscheduled public appearances. And the difference is scheduled public appearances is something that, you maybe get a citizen that calls up and says, I'd like to address the commission on this. And at council meetings, we give them 3 minutes, we put them on the agenda. If the council has a question for that person, they can ask them because it's agendized. There's not a lot of communication that goes back and forth, but it puts it on the agenda so they could actually ask questions. Whereas the unscheduled public appearance, that means if someone shows up and they want to make comments, they have a certain amount of time to do that. And then, like Kelly was saying, the members can't speak to them, you know, ask them questions. They can ask for that to be sent to an agenda or later on, ask staff to look into it, things like that. That's really the difference between scheduled and unscheduled. You can have a consent agenda, which I think most of you probably have that on your committees, where you might want to, you know, adopt a set of minutes and then another item. You don't have to have full discussion, and you can do it as one motion. And you put that on a consent agenda. They make the motion to move that the consent agenda of May 25th, the regular planning and zoning committee meeting be adopted. You get a second, and then you vote everything on that consent agenda in one motion, which is different than action agenda, where each individual item is on the agenda, and then you can vote on that separately. And then you can have discussion on it. You can have mayor and council ask, or not, or the work commission ask questions to the staff and actually kind of study it, and then make a motion to adopt that agenda item. And then if you have more than one agenda item on the action, then you vote on them separately. You can have briefing and discussion. Briefing items are a presentation with little or no discussion. Discussion is presented, may result in a lengthy discussion to provide staff direction. And then member comments, someday you have that at the end of your agendas. And that's like if you want to talk about current events, you watch the council, they'll talk about, they're going to go to this event or do this. It's basically just for information that you want to talk about with your, and let people know what's coming up.
Again, no discussion on that though.
Yeah, no discussion. And at the end of the meeting, you could have your calendar, which states the next meeting date and time. You could have informational items, such as something that staff might want to tell you, and it's listed there. There's no discussion on that. And then when you adjourn, the chairperson will adjourn the meeting. You don't need a motion to adjourn a meeting, unless some bylaws and some rules of procedure do say that you have to do that, but most of the commissions don't have to do that. The chair just says, okay, the meeting's adjourned, and if they have a gavel, they have the gavel, and then you get to go home. And then this kind of came up with some items that were asked. What do you want to?
So to make an item legal, you have to have a motion, a second, and then the vote. The intent for the vote must be clear. Sometimes your staff person, you've ever seen certain council meetings where there's a lot of discussion. I will sometimes ask for a clarification. Is this what you're intending by this motion? Because we as staff have to be able to record that motion, and we want to make sure everybody knows what they're voting on. You can have a motion to approve or adopt, which it can include, like for planning commission, they'll get 20 findings that they include. They can just do that in one motion and say, I move, and I include the findings. By the council rules, you can only vote, you can only have one amendment on a motion. So I make a motion, you second it. You decide, no, I want to add something to it. So I move to amend that we add X to the motion. If you get a second, then we vote on your amendment first. And if that is approved, then we vote on the motion as amended. But only one, because trust me, if you get more than one, nobody knows what's going on. And then your city attorney starts pulling her hair out, which is never good. And then if you just you think you're getting nowhere on an item, you're just talking in circles, you can say, I move to table this item. That means put it on temporarily. It can be brought back in another meeting, put on an agenda in another meeting, but it's a way to kind of say, we're done, we're not getting anywhere. And then obviously your other motions, you can adjourn, fix the hour adjournment, lay on the table, which is similar to the motion to table. That's you're just saying, we're not going to talk about this anymore. If there's a lot of discussion going on and you feel like it's fruitless and we need to move this meeting forward, you can say, I call for the question. I call or I move to vote. And so that stops the discussion and then proceed with the motion and vote on it. You can vote to postpone something to a certain day. You can phone indefinitely. You can refer it to another committee or a subcommittee. A lot of times, like, for example, planning commission, when they're talking about how something should look, they'll refer it out into the architectural review committee to help design, kind of figure out the design. And then, so if you have a public hearing and you say, I move that we continue this to June 30th at 2 p.m., that's a way that we don't have to re-advertise for the public hearing. So when you hear somebody be that specific about continuing something to table it to a certain time, that's so we don't have to advertise. You can just say, I move to continue this to the next meeting or down the road. So there's different ways you can deal with stuff. Most of the time it's in your straight. Let's have a motion, see if we.
That's basically all we have. I wanted to draw you to our new revamped member books. Has almost everything we've probably talked about in here, and more. And any questions you have, hopefully the answers will be here. We're very excited about this. It's got lots of pictures, so it's good.
But if there's any questions that come up, please reach out to a staff person. We are happy to come in to talk to you individually and talk to the board. Especially conflicts of interest, because that can be a little touchy and it's not always as quick as they would like. So happy to walk you through it.
And the nice,
I just want to apologize for the three of us that arrived late. We were notified that this meeting was at the city council chamber and not notified of the change of location.
oh no, we sent out, I'm sorry. I do apologize for that. Yeah, at the last minute, we realized planning and zoning happened. So I do.
That's interesting, by the way.
The planning and zoning?
They always are
Yeah.
interesting, aren't they?
I do apologize. Yes, I will send that, we'll be sending that out. We'll send out a link to that. If people aren't here, we'll have a link for the recording too. But yeah, we can send that. It's also on the board and commission webpage, but we'll go ahead and send you out a link. Yes, Regina can help you with that. So thank you for coming and doing that though.
With regards to maybe they should, for example, that a board meeting the same day, like the second two meetings at the same time, regular basis, or monthly or whatever. Send out an email. So which dates work best for them or something. I don't necessarily agree with you, but extent of the courtesy and disrespect.
Our best recommendation for most boards is to have a specific day you usually meet, whether it's second Tuesday of the month or, whatever works for that. There are certain boards, the Municipal Property Corporation, they use IDA, but I know there's Municipal Property Corporation, I'm trying to remember who's who. So frequently they meet once a year and no more. And if something comes up, they'll have a meeting. Board of Appeals, they only meet if there's an appeal they have to deal with. But for, the Arts Commission, for our Industrial Development Authority, we still have a set day we meet unless it's canceled because there's no business to be discussed. So for most of you, I recommend, and usually that's something that's addressed in the bylaws.
Yeah, sometimes it's in the bylaws, so you have to meet those days, but I think a lot of boards and commissions, I think they do try to pick a day. That way all the board members know every month that that's the day that it's going to be.
That would be my preference.
Yeah.
That's the way it's working.
Yeah. Which commission are you
Transportation.
The staff.
For whatever reason, cancel. Sometimes it happens. We're going to have more. Is there a requirement that it's cancellation?
We recommend that it be posted. It's usually posted where the meeting's going to occur and or the
Yes,
website.
we tell staff liaisons to go and they need to post some kind of notice. Sometimes if it's close enough, we'll have them, have a person stay there and let them know. But yeah, we'll post it on the website, but then we also want it posted where the meeting was gonna take place. And then the other part of that is if you have to change rooms, which we did, was, post where it is. Where the new place will be and things like that. But have a staff member there.
Any other questions?
Difference between a work session and a study session, sounds like there's.
They are very similar. Study sessions tend to go more in-depth dive on the things that are on the regular agenda. So a lot of you don't do study sessions. The Mayor and Council does study session on Monday and then the regular meeting on Thursday. And the study session is time for the Mayor and Council to ask staff questions, sometimes get a presentation so that you get a little more information. A lot of times Mayor and Council want staff to present so that the public knows what's going on, gets a little more information. Work sessions are really more like, for example, I'll use the dreaded chickens. We talk about whether to allow backyard.
Now, chickens per se are not dreaded, but
I was gonna say.
Discussions about backyard chickens are dreaded. So, but it's an opportunity for staff to present to the Mayor and Council. This is what our neighboring cities are doing. This is different options available and kind of get a feel from the council what they're comfortable with or what they're not comfortable with. So that's what we use a lot of our work sessions for, is that one, a really deep dive into one topic kind of, you know, and to get direction from the council so that we can bring back an ordinance or, you know, an action plan consistent with what the council wants to do.
Study session is pretty focused on a single issue that's going to come up before the
The work session.
the work session is more getting up to speed on an issue that might someday come before.
or something that staff might need direction on.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes like we do an annual update to our land use development code. We'll have studies or work sessions on specific things so that we as staff know how the council really wants us to proceed. For example, you know, we're built out, so we're going to be changing our building standards. So we want to meet with council. What do you want the city to look like? What are you thinking? So that we can bring a detailed ordinance that incorporates that.
and then one question about amendments. So we frequently will catch errors or things in the minutes.
Mhm.
People will bring those up. Typically, I'll turn to the staff and say, can we get it? It's corrected, and they'll say, sure, no problem. And then we will go and approve the minutes. We need to have the motion be something like, I get a motion to approve the minutes with the amendments discussed here.
Yeah,
Something-
That's the cleanest way.
And sometimes, what I like too is if someone is like, the minutes will go to the study session as part of the items. And if a council member notices there might be a mistake, they'll call me ahead of time and then can correct that. And then when they go to adopt it, I can say that this correction was made. Sometimes it's nice to know, the staff to know ahead of time that there needs to be a correction to the minutes.
I see that in my little booklet, the appointed officials are listed, but there are no names. Did you introduce yourselves early in the meeting? when
Yes.
we
Oh, yeah.
Missed it?
I'm sorry, I'm Kelly Schwab, I'm the city attorney.
And I'm Dana DeLong, the city clerk. That should have had our names. Oh, it doesn't.
What was yours again?
Dana DeLong. Yes. You know, we proved this a lot of times. I guess we knew our names.
We know our names.
And Josh
Vouch for it.
Wright is the city manager and Alicia Scoopin is the city magistrate.
What's the city manager's name?
Joshua Wright. We call him Mr. Wright.
It's all of our Mr. Rights.
Any other questions?
This is very helpful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
would recommend you.
We're headed that way.
We are working on it, yeah. Thank you. That's nice to have that feedback, because again, we like to prevent problems. It's much easier than trying to fix them on the other side.
And we really hate for you to go to meetings and just find the most stressful thing about the meeting is the meeting itself. You know, it's like, we want you guys to have some information about. You have business to do. We don't want to have to worry about the meeting itself. Yes, so we'll have the audio recording available. So we can send that out with the other link. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
For your help with the finalists for the airport commission. I know we're gonna